Friends, have you ever considered this painful truth? Why were the two brothers who created McDonald's ultimately ousted from the company they founded? The one who truly made $200 billion from McDonald's was a milkshake blender salesman. Why was Coca-Cola, originally a formula formulated by a pharmacist, built a $250 billion empire, but it was the businessman who later bought the formula for $2,300? These three people created hundreds of billions in value, yet they received less than a fraction of it. This is absolutely not a coincidence, but a fixed pattern that everyone experiences, and this pattern is currently playing out in your life. You go to work on time every day, connect with clients for the company, create outstanding performance, and receive a fixed salary at the end of the month. You think this salary is the entirety of the value you create, but this is precisely the core reason why you never make big money. The value you create never truly stays in your hands. Today, we will thoroughly dissect the most fundamental logic of making money, not just empty slogans about choice is more important than effort. It's not about luck or connections. I want you to truly understand why money flows to others but bypasses you, and what core truths you need to see to truly earn money. To understand the essence of making money, first answer a fundamental question: what exactly is money? Most people's first reaction is that money is a tangible thing that you have to work hard to earn and accumulate. But think about it carefully. Where did your salary go after it arrived last month? It paid rent, bought daily meals, and repaid various consumer loans. Then the landlord used your rent to pay the mortgage, and the food delivery platform used your money to pay the writers' salaries. Money never stayed in anyone's hands. So money is not a fixed item at all. Money is a continuously flowing river. It always flows between different people and never stops. Once you see the world from this perspective, the essence of making money completely changes. The question is no longer how do I make money? The real core question is, money is always flowing, so why would it actively flow to me? And the direction of this river of money. An eternal law, whether it's a multi-billion-dollar corporate merger or buying a simple bowl of noodles downstairs, the flow of money is always the same, from those with problems to those who can solve them. There are no exceptions. Since the essence of everyone making money is solving other people's problems, and it's all about solving problems, why do some people earn $5,000 a month while others earn tens of millions a year? Because the total amount of money flowing through you depends on three key valves. Multiplying these three together gives you your final income formula. Your income equals the number of people with needs multiplied by your indispensability multiplied by whether your presence is required to solve the problem. If any valve in this formula approaches zero, you will never make big money. Conversely, if any valve is amplified, your income can multiply exponentially. Most people spend their entire lives focusing on the middle valve, working tirelessly, studying hard, getting promoted, and raising salaries, trying to make themselves more valuable and less replaceable. This is not wrong, of course, but it's only one of the three valves. Perhaps you've never stopped to think, do I still have? The other two valves can be opened. Was the direction wrong from the start? Let's talk about the first valve, the scale of the number of people with demand. The principle behind this valve is very intuitive: find the common needs of the majority. If you stand beside a wide river, even using the most ordinary bucket to scoop water, you'll scoop more than someone using a golden bucket by a small stream. You might think, isn't this about choice being more important than effort? But you only understand half of it. Simply choosing the path with the most people isn't enough. You also need to see something more crucial: how high is the cost if these people can't solve this problem? For example, creating a PPT for a college student's classroom presentation is only worth 50 yuan, but helping an entrepreneur with an investor pitch can be worth 50,000 yuan. Where does the difference come from? It comes from the other person's situation. If a college student doesn't do well, at most they'll lose some credits, but if an entrepreneur doesn't do well, they might directly miss out on tens of millions in funding. Similarly, creating self-media content, teaching spreadsheet skills versus teaching investment and financial management, the income difference is enormous. You might say, teaching financial management is obviously more difficult, and that's true. There's a difference in actual difficulty, but the difference in overall difficulty is only 2 or 3 times. However, the potential for monetization differs by more than tenfold. The fear of not knowing how to manage money is far greater than the fear of not knowing how to create a spreadsheet. Therefore, income disparities are never based on differences in ability. The high premium in between stems from the other party's fear and the cost of not being able to solve the problem. There's an American brand called Death Water, which essentially sells ordinary drinking water, but packaged in aluminum cans with skull and axe designs, making it look like a can of beer. In 2024, its valuation reached $1.4 billion. Why was it successful? Because in a bar setting, non-drinkers carrying ordinary mineral water would look out of place, so they were willing to pay a premium for a bottle of water that looked like beer. Ultimately, money is the cost, desire is the cost, and face is also the cost. The greater the cost for the other party to not solve the problem, the higher your value. Therefore, the core of the first valve is, don't think about what you can do first observe why a large number of people are worried, what the cost of this problem is, and then consider what you can offer. What's the solution? Choosing the right direction is crucial, but you'll never be the only one by the river. If hundreds of people are crowding the same riverbank, why should money flow to you instead of someone else? This leads to the second valve. Xiao Wang worked as a business translator for 5 years. His English was excellent, and his translation quality was consistently high. However, he found that clients were always comparing prices. There were too many people in the market who could do business translation. They used his services today, but tomorrow they would find a cheaper alternative and simply replace him. Despite his considerable abilities, he couldn't retain clients. Another client, Xiao Lu, also started as a translator, but later focused on specializing in the medical device industry. He mastered all the industry regulations, terminology, and registration procedures. He could tell clients that translating a sentence this way would definitely lead to rejection by the Drug Regulatory Authority. The result? Xiao Lu's clients never compared prices. Because the small amount of money saved by replacing him was far from enough to cover the huge risk of rejection. The cost of bypassing him was simply too high. Your own ability and how irreplaceable you are two completely different things. What Xiao Lu achieved was the first aspect: irreplaceability. The formula combines scarce skills. For example, combining translation expertise with medical device industry knowledge creates a cross-disciplinary field with virtually no competitors. You don't need to be a top expert in a single area, but when you combine 2 or 3 skills, it's not that others can't learn from you, but rather that it would take them years to reach your level. There's also a second way to build a trust barrier. You've definitely seen people like this. Their skills aren't the absolute best, but clients only trust them. It's not because they can't find a replacement, but because once trust is established, the psychological cost of switching partners is extremely high. Skills can be learned quickly, but trust cannot be replicated. Ask yourself, if you left your job tomorrow, how long would it take the company to find a replacement? If the answer is always yes, then the river of wealth will never flow specifically to you. At this point, you might think the logic of making money is clear. Find a high-volume, high-demand river, make yourself irreplaceable, and you'll succeed. But I have to tell you a more painful truth. Returning to the 3 people mentioned at the beginning. McDonald's, the brothers, and the Coca-Cola pharmacist. They stood at the forefront of the biggest demand trend, and became almost irreplaceable. They opened the first 2 valves to the maximum, yet most of the money still ended up in other people's pockets. Why? Because there's a truth hidden in making money that many people never realize in their entire lives. How much value you can create is one thing, who ultimately holds that value is another entirely. In economics, these 2 things are called value creation and value capture. These are 2 completely different abilities. Most people spend their entire lives honing the former, but never realize the existence of the latter. Turn your perspective back to yourself. You spend 3 months creating a plan, your boss uses it to sign a large order, and the customer relationship, repeat purchases, and profits all stay in the company system. Observe any industry, the most profitable people are often not the most skilled at doing things, but those who possess a complete system. Therefore, the second valve isn't just about making yourself more capable, you also need to clearly understand one thing: who ultimately holds the value you create. If the answer is that most of it flows away, then the stronger you are, the more others earn. What you really need to change is your relationship with value. How to change this is the third valve. How to truly keep value in your own hands. The key lies in this third valve. Does solving a problem require your personal presence? If you always have to be present, your abilities will be forever locked within yourself. The moment you stop working, all your income immediately drops to 0. But when you find a way to avoid being present, value truly begins to accumulate for you. 10,000 years ago, the most important shift in human civilization was the transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture. The logic of hunting is, if you catch prey today, you have food today, if you don't, you starve. The next day, everything starts from scratch. No matter how hard yesterday was, it won't make today any easier. Labor is a disposable commodity. Once used, nothing remains. Farming is completely different. You spend months tilling, sowing, and watering, reaping no harvest during that time, but in autumn, the harvest far exceeds the investment. Most importantly, you can save some of the grain as seeds to plant more land next year. Today's labor becomes tomorrow's asset. Labor begins to accumulate. The way most people make money, receiving a monthly salary, charging by the hour, or settling payments by order, is essentially hunting. If you stop working for a day, you lose a day's income. Last month's efforts won't increase this month's income by a single penny. But some people choose a different path. There's a Japanese woman named Marie Kondo. She started by offering in-home tidying services, charging tens of thousands of yen per session, and typically only visiting 2 clients a day, a classic example of trading time for money. Later, she wrote her tidying methods into a book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, which has been translated into 40 languages and sold over 10 million copies. Netflix then invited her to star in a reality show, broadcast globally. Her tidying skills remained unchanged, but she extracted that skill from herself and transformed it into books and programs. While she slept, millions worldwide were generating revenue for her. The same principle applies to McDonald's. Ray Kroc, the salesman who acquired McDonald's, didn't create a more delicious hamburger, he refined the hamburger making process. Disassembling it into a standardized system, transforming it into your own business system. From that moment on, brand expansion was no longer limited by any individual. The 2 brothers who invented the McDonald's model were more capable, but they didn't transform their abilities into assets, so they ultimately didn't amass enormous wealth. Turning personal experience into products, work methods into content, and separating abilities from oneself to create a system that operates independently, that's the shift from hunting to farming. The third valve was thus completely opened. So why do most people remain in the hunting mode? Because hunting has a powerful allure, certainty. Taking action today yields a certain return today. This instant feedback is addictive. Farming, on the other hand, means spending months or even a year on something, with no return during that time, no one paying you, no one telling you if you're on the right track, and you're not even sure if it will ultimately be profitable. Most people give up during this period. What truly hinders most people isn't ability or understanding, but an over-reliance on certainty. Hearing this, you might think, so you're saying I have to start a business, build a self-media system, to make big money? That's not the case. Not everyone needs to open all 3 valves. Many people who talk about business acumen won't tell you this, especially the third valve. Not everyone needs to open it immediately, and most people rush to open it too early. Instead, he completely messed up the first 2 valves. A plastic surgeon earning millions a year has spent his entire life performing surgeries himself. The third valve has never been opened. But do you think he's doing poorly? For ordinary people, he's already incredibly successful because his first valve is large enough. The desire for beauty is a universal need. A large population has this demand and is willing to pay high fees. Furthermore, his second valve is maximized. In his specific field, patients only request surgery from him. Their level of trust is irreplaceable. With the 2 valves fully open, it doesn't matter if the third valve remains closed. But if he wants to increase his annual income from millions to tens of millions, it's absolutely impossible to do it all by performing surgeries with just his own hands. He must open the third valve, he must open his own clinic. The team you build trains apprentices, turning your experience and methods into clinic assets, rather than keeping them only to yourself. Conversely, if someone creates an online course, the third valve is opened, allowing them to continuously sell courses without being physically present. However, if their chosen direction has very little demand, and others can explain the course content, then 2 of the 3 valves are close to 0, and the multiplied result is still small. Therefore, what you really need to do is not pursue 3 things simultaneously, but first ask yourself where you are stuck. If you have sufficient professional skills, and your clients recognize your abilities, but your income always hits a ceiling and you can't increase it, then it's highly likely that the first valve is faulty. You need to switch to a larger demand sector. But if your money-making strategy is sound, but you're constantly being replaced or having your prices reduced, it's probably because your second valve, finishing mechanism, isn't strong enough. You need to make yourself unassailable. If your first 2 valves are good, but your income is always tied to time, requiring your personal presence each time, it's time to consider opening the third valve. Find your bottleneck and focus your efforts on opening that valve. This is far more effective than trying to do everything but mastering nothing. Finally, I want to say that making money is simple in some ways. The underlying logic is simply this formula, but also difficult in others. The difficulty lies in every step from understanding to actual implementation. Only through genuine practice can you gain true knowledge. I wish everyone can find their own wealth valve and easily achieve wealth growth.